So we've had a look at 3ds Max standard lights. Now we're going to look at 3ds Max Photometric Lights. Okay. Now the last light I created was this Omni light. I'm just going to select it and hit delete on the keyboard to get rid of it. Let's go back to the Create menu. Let's go to Lights. And this time, instead of going to the Standard Lights menu, let's go to Photometric Lights. Now we only have a couple of 3ds Max Photometric Lights, and we do have a third down here, a mental ray light, and we'll look at that later. Right now, we want to look at these Photometric 3ds Max lights. We have a target light and a free light, so it's pretty simple. They're actually both the same exact thing. The only difference between the two is that one of them has a target icon which you can use to direct which way you want the light to focus on, and the other one's just free and doesn't have any type of target constraining it. So let's look at the target light very quickly. And when we select that, you're going to get this dialog window that opens up by default, and it says you're creating a photometric light. Haha, 3ds Max knows exactly what you're up to. Now, 3ds Max recommends that you use the mental ray photographic exposure control. That's what MR stands for. Now, exposure control settings can be adjusted from the environment and effects dialog. If you remember, that's that window that we opened up where we controlled the global lighting and all that stuff. And it says, would you like to change this now? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. If that's what you recommend, mental ray, fine. Then we'll go ahead and hit yes. Then I'll simply just click and drag here and create my little target locator there. Right click to end the creation session, and let's move this light up here, which is pretty good. Let's hit 2 on the keyboard and switch over to the modify panel here. And you can see we have quite a number of parameters here to change. Okay. Now very quickly, just to sidetrack here a little bit, hit 8 on the keyboard to open up the environment and effects window here. If you remember, this should look a little bit familiar to you. We did open up this window before. You notice that under exposure control, mental ray photographic exposure control is turned on. So you can see down here we have a whole bunch of different parameters. Now we're going to be talking about these different parameters later. Not now. We'll just go over a few if we need to change any settings, but we're going to be going over this in depth later on when we start working further into this tutorial and different projects and things like that. Okay, so I just want to show you where this was. Let's go ahead and close that. Alright, so let's go ahead and do a test render here and see what we have. Now you can see here that this is extremely bright here, which is obviously not good. Okay, so let me close that. What we need to do is simply get this lighting under control because it's so bright. We also have the ability here to change shadows. So you can see here we have different parameter rollouts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click over here and hit close all, just to close all of those parameter rollouts. Now some of these parameter rollouts look just like the rollouts from the standard lights. For example, the mental ray indirect illumination rollout, advanced effects, atmospheres and effects, shadow map parameters, shadow parameters, and even the intensity and color attenuation. Well, actually it doesn't look exactly the same, but we're going to go over that now. Okay, we have a few rollouts here that are a little bit different. Again, the intensity, color, and attenuation rollout retains the same name, but as you can see, the parameters are completely different than what we had with the standard lights. The general parameters look pretty much the same. Now we do have this new parameter rollout called templates, and we're going to look at that in a moment. Okay. Now right now our light has no shadows and it's extremely bright. So let's go to the general parameters. Let's turn shadows on. Now again, we can choose different types of shadows. Let's go for ray trace shadows, since mental ray can work with those just fine. Okay. Let's collapse that rollout. Let's collapse all of them actually. Let's go to intensity, color, and attenuation. Now that we have shadows, let's change the intensity. To control the intensity, we can control it a few different ways. Down here under intensity, we can choose what type of measurement system we're going to use for the intensity. LM over here is lumens, CD over here is actually candela, and LX is lux, or LUX. And we can use these different types of measurement systems that are used in the industry and in the respective industries to control the lighting. So if you say work in engineering, you're probably familiar with a few of these like candela, lumens, or lux over here, which you can use to control the intensity of the light. So if you're an architect, maybe you're familiar with candela, or maybe you're familiar with lumens. If you're an engineer, maybe you work with lux, so on and so forth. So it really depends on what measurement system you want to use. It's no different than working with, say, centimeters or working with inches. You know, working with the English system or the international measurement system. Okay, so let's go ahead and we can actually choose whatever we want here. Let me just go with candela here. And right now we're set to 1500. It's a setting of 1500 candela. We're going to go ahead and change that from 1500. Let's go to like, I don't know, 500. Oops, that's not 500, that's 00. So let's go 500 here. Let's do render. And it's still very, very bright. So let's actually reduce that by quite a bit. Let's go with 100 here. And it's still pretty bright. We can also go down here to this dimming parameter that says resulting intensity. We can actually knock down intensity based on a percentage here. So for example, we can use 100% of 100 candela, or we can knock it down to 50%. So it's going to be half that. If we render again, it's going to be a little bit less bright, but it's still pretty bright. So let's go with something like maybe 10%. Now you can see this, we can start to see this a little bit better. It's still kind of bright there. And these photometric lights, since they're photorealistic lights, they actually already use inverse square fall off by default. So as you can see over here, it's dimmer than it is over here where the light is located. So let's actually continue to reduce this. And let's not use percentage. So let's just use a solid num. Editor, edit that out of the video. There was a bird in the background. Start again in 3, 2, 1. Let's just use a solid number here. Let's tone it all the way down to 10. See what we can get there. And it's still pretty bright. And that's not a problem. I'm not going to worry about that right now. What we can do also is we can change the color. Now you can change the color a few different ways. You can add a color filter here. So I can say add a green filter. Hit OK. If I render this out, we'll have a green filter over the light. Let me switch it back to white here, which is the default. And we have a couple of different color choices. We can actually choose a different color profile. So by default, the standard color profile used in the industry is D65. We can actually use different color profiles here. We can use profiles for halogen cool or warm lights. We can use fluorescent, and we have quite a different number of options here for fluorescent. We can use white, daylight, warm white, cool white. We also have xenon and incandescence, and we can also use quartz and mercury lights. A whole bunch of different light profiles here that we can choose from. I'm going to stick with D65 for the moment. We can also choose the color temperature. So we can switch it to color temperature, which will be determined in Kelvin. Okay, right now it's set to 3600 degrees Kelvin, and we can see here that we have a color swatch here, which if we click on, it won't actually open up a color selector, so we can't choose the color. What that's there for is to show you representation of the color that you're going with here when you're changing your Kelvin setting here. So as I increase it, it becomes a sort of white hot until it becomes so hot that it actually goes into a sort of the violet or blue stage here. So if I could change it to a very soft blue there, hit render, and now you can see that the color changes here in the light accordingly, which looks more like a sort of fluorescent type light. If I want it to be a warmer light, I can go to something like this, to about 5000, hit render, and we get this sort of warm reddish color for a light here, which is actually pretty interesting. Okay, now something that's more interesting about these photometric lights is if we go up to templates here, we can go to the template selector, and we have quite a number of templates that we can choose here. We can choose a 40 watt bulb, 100 watt bulb, halogen lights, like 100 watt halogen light bulb. We can also choose recessed lights. We can also choose street lamps, stadium 1000 watt lamps, and so on and so forth. So say for example, let's go with a 100 watt light bulb. Let's go ahead and render. And this is actually pretty bright here, but still looks pretty interesting. Let's go down here. Let's use something like one of these recessed lights. So let's go with a 75 watt lamp. Okay, and we get a light profile with it here, or a photometric light profile. Let's go ahead and hit render. And this is what we get. You can see a light profile here from the photometric light. These lights are excellent and are actually necessary for when you're doing any type of very realistic architectural visualizations. If you're doing any light engineering work or any type of visualizations that require some photorealistic photometric lights that use IES profiles, you want to stick with this. Okay? You can see the profile here. We can actually click on here and we can load up different types of IES profiles. Now these are some of the profiles that come by default with 3ds Max 2010. You can actually go to light manufacturers and order some light profiles for specific lights created by that specific light manufacturer. Okay, and we can choose different types of formats here like IES and a few others here. IES is probably the most popular one. So we can go say Point Street IS, open that up. Then we can go ahead and render this out. We're going to get ourselves a different light profile here, and it's actually going to be a bit too bright. So let's go here to the light intensity. Let's knock this down to, I'm going to knock it down to 100. See what I get there. A little bit less intense. And you can see how these photometric lights work. And the photometric lights from 3ds Max work just fine with mental ray. In fact, I recommend that you use them with mental ray, as they're more realistic and better suited for architectural and design visualization type of work. Okay, so that's going to do it for this photometric light. Let's go back to create here. We can see here we also have the free light. Now the free light is the same thing as the target light. The only difference is if I select the light and I go to the general parameters, you can see that I have a target parameter here. If I turn that on, now it's a target light, a target photometric light. If I go back to that parameter and I turn it off, now it's a free photometric light. So that's the only difference between the two. So there you go. That's photometric lights from 3ds Max in a nutshell, and they do work with mental ray, so you can feel free to go ahead and use them without having to worry about any type of problems. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to go ahead and talk about some direct lighting using mental ray specific lights.